Well, good afternoon / evening, everyone. How are you guys today?
Good.
Good? All right. Well, appreciate you all coming here. So my name is Dr. Joshua Watson. I'm a professor in the department chair in our Counseling and Ed Psych program. And so I've been doing some of these GROW workshops for about 4 or 5 years now. I think they're great resources and opportunities for you to kind of either supplement what you're learning in your programs that kind of help you get ready for thesis or dissertations, or perhaps it's the first time you hear some of this information. So I know people come from probably different areas and backgrounds and specialties, so the material is going to be very generic, so it's not going to be specific to one type of domain or one type of research approach, whether you're a qualitative or quantitative researcher. So hopefully you'll be able to get stuff that you could apply for your studies. So before we begin, kind of what's the sense of the room? What motivated you guys to be here? You have to be here, all the way to this is information you want to learn. Oops, sorry.
So sorry.
No problem.
I'm planning to start my thesis next semester, so I'm thinking this would be great.
Okay.
to start.
Great. What else? I know some programs make their students come. Some people are here because they really could use the information. So
I'll go. I'm in the PhD program for CNI with a reading emphasis.
Okay.
So I'm in my last 2 classes with Dr. Valadez, so I'll be starting comps next semester and writing summer after that.
Yeah, so just right around the corner, huh?
Yes.
Good, good. Okay. So like I said, depending on whatever study you're going to do, I think you'll find some information that'll be helpful. So before we talk about research questions, I want to kind of take a step back and broaden our image here. So I got a picture here. I want you to think about this picture for a minute. And my question to you is, what do you see in the picture? All right, so it's interactive workshop, so you'll get to participate. So think about, what do you see? It's not a trick question, so just what do you see?
Taco, dinosaur, a little girl.
Maybe the little girl is worried the dinosaur is gonna eat her taco.
The dinosaur's going to eat her taco? Okay.
That's a story.
He's a South Texas dinosaur, maybe? What else? What do you guys see?
I mean, she looks like she could be scared of either like the taco or the dinosaur.
Okay. Anything else?
Taco is far and the dinosaur is just running around.
Okay. All right, so some similarities in what you see, some differences. Let's kind of start with this dinosaur. How do you know that's a dinosaur?
It's just hard maybe.
Have we seen dinosaurs? Are they still around? You've seen pictures?
Yeah. Museum.
Museums, fossils that we have. What are you going to say?
We were taught.
You were taught.
Dinosaur.
Okay.
That's why.
Okay. So someone shared this with you. None of you, I'm going to say, haven't encountered a dinosaur. Nobody has a pet dinosaur. You were kind of taught this. How about the taco? How do you know it's a taco?
It says literally how they
Looks like a taco. You guys have had tacos before? All right, so it's relatable. And then this little girl, I heard some people say she looked like she's fearful, maybe, or anxious and scared.
Yeah.
What made you say that?
Like her facial expression.
Expressions?
Yeah.
Okay.
the action made by it.
All right, yeah, so her kind of posture and stance. Has anyone felt that way before? Fearful, scared, anxious, nervous? All right, so again, it's relatable. So the point of all this is, before we start talking about research questions, we want to talk about how we consume information in the world. Okay, there's lots of different ways we consume information, and the way that we consume information and what we consider to be good information and bad information really is going to dictate the type of research lens you take to your studies, and thus the type of research questions you ask. So some of these, you may have looked at the girl and said, I've been there, I know what she's experiencing, because of personal experiences. Maybe it brought back a memory for you. A dinosaur, all right, that's what you saw in a book. You were taught, I don't know, maybe a Tyrannosaurus Rex really is only this tall, and we've just assumed they're this big. And in tacos, people have had them, they know what it is, so it's visually recognizable. Okay? So our experiences in the world help to start shape our lens of how we gather information. Okay? So you as a researcher, really all you do in life is research. You're gathering information, taking in information. Then the second part of that I mentioned is what's good information, what's bad information. You know, 'cause we're flooded with information. Where do we get information? Well, for some people, information comes from education. I was taught this. I learned it in school. I read about it, whether it's in a book, online, something like that. And so we believe good information is, it was in a textbook. My teacher taught it to me. It must be true. Why would they tell me something false or inaccurate? So if we go to the middle, for some people, good information comes from experiences. I have to touch it, feel it, experience it for it to be real to me. All right, so I'll share a lot of my personal examples too. So whenever we're out at a restaurant and the wait staff brings a plate and they say, be careful, this is very hot, I always touch the plate because I'm like, I wonder what their definition of hot is. Is it really hot or not? So for me, I have to experience it to say, oh, that really is hot. All right, maybe for some of you that's not the case. You could take it at face value. Someone tells you. And then third, true information may come from groups in our lives. Cultural groups, religious groups, civic groups, family. Those trusted individuals become our source of knowledge. And so if I've learned it from those groups, it must be true, because those are people like me who have similar interests and want to see me succeed. Okay. Again, how you look at information and where it comes from is going to dictate a lot about how you look at research. Whether you're looking at doing experiments, qualitative interviews, archival reviews, is where you get information from. So all this leads to this idea of ontology. And so you may have heard of the word before, you may not have heard of the word before, but we know we have kind of the root ending here. It's the study of something. And so ontology is really looking at how do we know what exists in the world? Right, so how do we know what's true? What's reality? Where does reality come from? Now we all have different realities. We perceive the world differently. Even right now, we're all in the same room, in the same experience, but we have different perceptions of it. And so understanding your view of reality as an individual is going to shape the type of research that you do. When you're aware of the way that you view the world, you'll see, hopefully in the next couple of slides, that it starts kind of driving you down a path of the type of research that you'll do. And so there's different ontological persuasions, different ways that people look at the world. And you can be combinations of these. It's not you're absolutely in one of these groups and one of these groups only. But we tend to have preferences. So we could start over here. On one end of the spectrum, we have this naive realism. And so this is the belief that something is real because it makes sense, it sounds plausible. I think it is. All right, so we could think of different things that we think are true because they make sense, whether they come from what we learned in books, what we learned from our families, what we experience. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Moving a little forward, we have structural realism. People who fall into this camp say, I'm not going to just wholeheartedly believe everything. There has to be some rules behind it to be able to test it. But I only go that far. I don't know what causes it. So a good example of structural realism is like we have the belief in gravity. And so we have these formulas, these physical formulas of what gravity is. But why does it exist? We've never answered that. Like, why is it there? That's where critical realism comes in. So some people are, no, I have to know everything about it. From beginning to end, A to Z, every aspect of it. We then shift a little further to bounded relativism. That we start to say that, you know, there are some things that are just truths that I believe, and they're probably true across settings and across populations. So we talk about this in our department too. We notice when the new semester starts in fall, it's really hard to find parking around here. But then usually around October-ish, when people start dropping classes or things change, it eases up a little bit. Are we the only university that's true? No, it's probably, I can make a general assumption, probably happens at other universities too. And then on the far end, relativism, that everything is contextual and place-bound and subject-specific. So your view of the world is, okay, this may be how it is, but it's only here. I need to go and study what it's like here, and here, and here. So from those brief descriptions, can you see yourselves falling into any of those camps, kind of like how you think about things? Are you more of a critical person? Are you more of an accepting person? Or are you more of a time and place only? I got to experience something different in different places. Wherever you are is going to lead into the type of research that you do. So my question for you is then, what is truth? In your lives, what is truth for you?
Yeah, something works in every scenario.
Okay. So that's a kind of high threshold, right? It's got to work in every single situation. So, okay. Could be. There's no wrong answer, so we all have our own views of truth. What about some of the rest of you? What's truth? How do you know what's truth? You consume information on a daily basis. What's the measuring stick when you look at it and say, yeah, I believe that, versus no, I don't believe this?
It also might change like from time to time. When there was like 10 or 15 years ago, about cigarettes, it was considered as medicine, and they told it it's the truth, but later they found that the effects,
Yep.
and that's the truth now, so it might change.
Yeah, throughout my lifetime, eggs are good for you, eggs are bad for you. No, eggs are good for you, no, you can't have eggs. And so who knows? So yeah, truth changes as we get more information.
So my understanding for truth is like it's really personal definition of, from the constructive perspective, right? So how you as a person individually define what is truth for you. Because there is a difference between truth and factor, right?
So there's a big personal component to it.
Right.
Okay.
Right now you believe something is true, but maybe someone else say it as a false, right? So.
Yeah, maybe adding to that, something, if you claim something and it works, until you disprove it, I think that's considered as true.
Yeah, so kind of if it works, or if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's working for me, I'm going to say that's good until I have an experience where it doesn't hold up. Okay. So then on the flip side of that question, so what's, we hear this term all the time now, what's fake news? What's untruthful? How do you know when you hear something that you say, I don't believe that?
Illogical.
Just tell me a little more about it.
So for example, if something is not like following physics or against the natural process or something,
Okay. So it kind of goes against like some established
Yeah.
realisms that we have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Something that doesn't have like enough facts to support it.
Okay.
So I consider that as like false information or like false news.
Okay.
Well, when you talk about truth, I think it has twofold, let's say the two dimension. One is absolute truth, but I think you just talk about this matter like which works everywhere. That may be possible only in natural science to know theory of everything, for example.
Mhm.
And Einstein or, for example, Hawking's were working on that, but we're not going in that part. Since
Yep.
we're in the social science, that's why I think it's a relative truth we are talking about. And that's right to talk about the truth can be changed over the period of time
Mhm.
based on our own understanding and our own experiment, our own, other kind of perspective to look at particular phenomena. So come back to the say things like that is more about natural science kind of things that we talk about, scientific kind of things, that how we assert some sort of things are right or wrong,
Mhm.
how we believe or not. That is also relative, that is based on the fact.
Mm-hmm.
That's our interpretation of fact.
Right.
If some information is wrong or right based on our own, interpretation of that particular fact. So it is a little bit, I think I'm a little bit rambling on that, but that is things that is my understanding on this. So based on that, we just make mind like, oh, well, this is right or this is wrong, based on the fact that we comprehend.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So it's kind of a combination then of
Yeah.
knowledge that we have about the world and then also our own experiences as well. Yep. So based on what you guys have shared, hopefully you could kind of start seeing is kind of the way that we understand truth gives a certain lens to how you approach research that may or may not be in tune with the type of study you're doing. So if you're the person who, I need to see the facts, I need to see the proof, I need to see the theorem behind it, I need evidence of it, that typically mindset lends itself more to quantitative studies, that I need to collect data and hard facts. If you're more of an experiential and what it means and the kind of personal part about it, maybe you lend more towards a qualitative mindset. And one's not better than the other, but sometimes when you're thinking about studies that you want to do, don't go against the grain. If this is the kind of mindset you have and this is how you interpret information, maybe those are the type of studies that you'll find more interest in and will be more meaningful and impactful for you. So I wanted to cover this first before we talk about research questions, because I think it's really important for you to kind of take a break, think about it, how do I see the world? How am I interpreting information? Because that's going to be, in a study, how you're going to gather information. So they have this parable of the blind men and the elephant, and so you've probably heard this one or seen this one before, but your perception of reality is context-based. And so if you're in a dark room, you're blindfolded, you're blind, and you're only touching part of the situation, that's what you're going to perceive reality to be. And your view is limited. There's potentially more to the story that's out there. As researchers, we don't necessarily have to know the whole story, particularly when you're doing a thesis or a dissertation. Your task or your goal is not to solve all the world's problems. All right? If you do, great, more power to you, but don't set that as the benchmark for you. Most dissertations, most research that we do in the social sciences is let's move the needle. Let's move our understanding a little bit. And the belief being that if you do a little bit, you do a little bit, and I do a little bit, eventually we'll grow our knowledge. Okay, so taking your piece, realizing that there's other stories or perspectives out there, hopefully together we could put together a bigger picture. Now the other side of ontology, yeah.
Yeah, can you go back to the...
Sure.
So you said we gotta put together all the information that we get. So suppose we don't know that what an elephant is.
Mhm.
So in this case of blind men, they're gonna take information like they're just feeling different features at different times.
Mhm.
And how would you put that together? Like how would you relate it and make an elephant?
So communication, talking with one another, but not only just talking, tying in research. So part of the study that you'll do when you do your lit review and you pull in information, kind of the metaphorical elephant we have is, maybe we have an idea of a teaching approach that works in this population or some type of intervention that works for this group, but we don't know how it works with this group. We don't know how. Essentially, we're kind of looking at the same thing. We only know how this works in this situation. Let's start broadening that understanding that this intervention, now we know it works here and here, or with this population and this population.
Yeah, wouldn't it work when you have something to compare as a fact?
Mm-hmm.
But what if you don't know anything about it and it's entirely new?
Yeah, so then maybe you are kind of starting that first piece, and then you become the kind of cornerstone brick of this wall of knowledge that we're building. Could be. So the other ology I want you to kind of think about and be aware of is this idea of epistemology. So another philosophical discipline that looks at the origin or nature of human understanding. So how do we know the world? Okay, how do we tend to acquire information? And so I'll give you a real simple example. When you're a small baby, where do you learn about the world? You got to think back to when you were a child. How do you learn about the world as a small baby?
You see people.
Modeling. All right, so you're not reading books.
Information provided by our parents
Mm-hmm.
and experiences like what we are seeing and what we are listening. Sort of form.
Mm-hmm.
We form our ideas like what is what. So
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing.
So family, and it could be parents or whatever your family unit is, tells us things, and we believe that's the truth. That's what our family tells us. That's the way that we take in knowledge, or it's modeling, They talk a lot about children, and it's like they watch everything that you're doing, and they're going to model that behavior. As we grow older, that changes. So when you become 13, 14, 15 years old, where's your source of information? Do you still listen to whatever your parents say? No? Who's the expert? YouTube, or your 13-year-old friend who knows everything about the world, right? They become the source of experts. So that's where we get our knowledge from, our peer groups and friends and things like that. And then you grow and you go to school, and if you go to college, then, my professor said it must be true, that's knowledge. And then you get older and you start to say, no, I have to experience it, and that becomes reality for me. So it's always changing how we gather information and how we know what our information is. But at any of those stages, we have these kind of little checklists that we go through, whether you know it or not, about how we differentiate between true knowledge, which we'll call adequate, and false knowledge, inadequate knowledge. Right? And we make these decisions. I'm going to believe this, I'm not going to believe this. And like you said earlier, it changes over time as well. So maybe when you were a child, your parents told you your teeth fall out, you put them under your pillow, the tooth fairy comes and you have this. Right? Eventually you reach an age when you're like, I know that's not true anymore. But you believe it at a time. So we need to think about what is knowledge, where does knowledge come from, and is it valid? So those are kind of the three questions we talk about. And so within this epistemological viewpoint, we have really three different ways of looking at it. So here we're going to look at an objective perspective. So objectivism is based on the belief that we could see a situation and it's pretty universal. We all could kind of understand what's going on. What are these guys doing? Are they accountants? Or professional athletes? All right, fishermen, okay? So we all look at that and we all recognize these are fishermen. All right, it's an objective truth. We could all look at it, we could all see the same thing. We come down here, subjectivism. What do you see in that picture?
Money.
A lot of money? A little bit of money?
Zoomed in.
Maybe it depends on your perspective. If you're a billionaire, you may be like, that's probably what's in my couch cushions. All right? If you're a graduate student, you're like, yeah, I can take that right now. So it's very subjective. It's how you view it. Okay, if money is a struggle or finances are an issue, you look at this and it holds a lot of value for you. If finances are something you never think about and you come from means, then you may look at it and say. So they had a video once, they were talking to Bill Gates and asking him how much does a gallon of milk cost at the store and how much does these things cost. He had no clue. He was like, gallon, I don't know, $20, $25, how much does it cost? Money's not an object for him, so it really kind of doesn't hold a lot of value. And then over here we have constructivism. So our view of reality is based on our experiences and how we view them. So how many people like roller coasters? All right. I hate them. I will not go on one at all. We went to Disney World for our honeymoon, and my wife's like, you wanted to go for me? I said, no, I guess we're just getting divorced, and I'm not doing a roller coaster, no matter who it's for, how much someone's paying me. I just don't like it. Some people love it. All right, so we have this, we all view the world differently. Okay, and it's that view is based on our experiences. So those are different ways that you could kind of view the world. And again, that's going to tie into how you are as a researcher. If you're an objective person, you want something to be the same all the time, you need facts. It's more of a quantitative research type thing. If you're more of a subjective or constructivist person, you're more of a qualitative researcher. Your mind goes to, well, I wonder how it is for those people that I'm studying. What's it like in this situation? So again, think about yourself and what's going to make your research process easier. So all of that gets us to research questions. So this idea of framing research questions starts with the theory, your understanding of the world, who you are as a person, who you are as a researcher. All of that then leads to the types of questions that you ask. Because the questions we ask are going to be based on, what do I need to know? What do I consider to be truth? And however I think something is truthful, that's the type of information I need to be collecting. So then we ask questions that way. And then your questions lead to your designs. The types of studies that you use, the analyses that you will conduct. You probably heard your faculty talk about this, but it has to go in this order. All right, the students who come and say, I want to do a qualitative study, or I want to do a correlational design study. You got to have the question first. And the question drives the design that you do. It's not going to work if you try to retrofit a study that I want to do this approach and then work backwards, because you're going to miss items. You're going to have gaps in your understanding. So what are research questions? So your research question is a statement that you're going to have that's going to help you define what it is that you hope to learn in your study. And so you're going to have, you'll see in a moment, different levels of research questions. You'll have kind of an overarching question. And then you'll break it down into smaller questions, and perhaps those smaller questions have subparts as well. The research question is going to focus around the gap. All right, and so your study, when you build a thesis or you build a dissertation, really should be synthesizing what we know about a topic and narrowing that discussion down till we reach this critical point where we have a gap. This is what we don't know. And your questions emanate from that gap. They should talk about what we know, what we don't know, and what we're trying to solve or prove or evidence in this particular study. And again, it may be that your study does fill the whole gap. Maybe it fills part of the gap. Both are okay. Filling part of the gap gets us closer to knowing the full picture. And so research questions become important if you're doing quantitative or qualitative research. A lot of times people think research question, that's more experimental, that's more data collection, that's a quantitative approach. It's qualitative as well. You have to have a question. You can't just go in there and say, what's up, people? And then have your participants just give you information and then try to put it together in some way. So as you guys are thinking about your research, are you guys thinking about quantitative studies, qualitative studies? Do you have ideas about maybe what you want to research? Or are you still open? Everybody's open, nice, that's good. So you come in with a fresh perspective, maybe you kind of really see what the field needs.
Even go for mix would be, because the phenomena, some types of phenomena may be better explained through mixed method.
Mm-hmm.
Like not only quantitative can explain that properly,
Yep,
and even we need qualitative also
yep,
to explain certain phenomena. That's why that the third facets of these all things, not only two dichotomous
Mhm.
perspective to look at, like data can be only two, so rather it's a mix of both.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. I think I subconsciously left that one out because a lot of students in our program are like, I don't want to do that. That's going to take me forever. I don't want to be here forever. So they pick one or the other to graduate and get out. And then they always talk about, that's going to be my next study when I graduate and I get a faculty position or wherever I'm going to do. They don't do that, you?
Do not want you to go into that.
But you're right, sometimes those mixed methods, especially when you do them in a sequential manner. So maybe you collect a lot of data and you find, this population scores really high on this inventory or this measure I have. Let me talk to some people and figure out what's going on. Or you start with a qualitative and say, wow, this seems to be an issue in this population. Let me now survey a larger group of people and see if it's a problem for them as well. So we talked about this idea of this gap. And gaps come from a lot of different places. So you're probably told, these two on the outside, that gaps really come from your review of the literature. What do you see out there in the literature? But I want you to also consider this other component, your experiences. So I'm assuming that the fields that you all are in, you weren't just dropped in that field randomly, that you have some background in it, some experience in it, some interest in it. So your experiences could help as well. All right? Anecdotal experiences that, this is something that I've perceived to be missing or askew or unexplained in my field. That's part of it too. That could factor into your research design and your questions too. It can't be the sole purpose, so you do want to have things that are supported by the literature, but I wanted to give you that freedom to understand that not everything has to be a citation for it, a citation for it, a citation for it, that you have experience, you have expertise that you can contribute as well. All of it gets kind of placed in this funnel that leads us to this information gap, what it is that we're missing. And you'll use that gap to start kind of formulating a question on what you want to answer. So types of research questions that you could have. You could have descriptive questions, and we'll do quantitative ones first. Relational or causal. Descriptive studies are really looking at kind of what's going on. Let me get an understanding. So you mentioned maybe you're the first one doing this in this area. Maybe that lends itself to descriptive designs. We really need to kind of get a lay of the land. What's going on? What do we need to know about this area? Relational studies, correlations, regressions, trying to figure out kind of relationships between variables. How do these things go together? Do they go together? And then our causal designs, more of our experiments, quasi-experiments, to really see cause and effect. What is leading to these things that we're observing? And these things that we're observing, these variables, those are your truths. Okay? Things that you believe to actually be happening. So as you start building these questions and start framing out what you want to answer, you'll have a general question that begins with. Okay? That's kind of your overarching what your dissertation is about. So your friends and family, who most of the time don't know what you're doing in school, say, what's this dissertation? What are you doing your study on? That's kind of your general question. I want to look at this, or I want to examine this, or I'm interested in knowing more about this. Okay? Helpful in talking about your study, but less helpful in terms of doing something about it, actually collecting data and analyzing it. So from that general question, we're going to have some implied questions. And towards the end, I'll give you some pointers and tips on how to frame and structure those implied questions so that you can get the information that you want to get. But this is typically where we start looking at not only having information, but what's going to be the ultimate utility of that information. What do you hope to do with it? And then, not always, but sometimes those implied questions have sub-questions themselves. All right, so maybe I'm looking at a comparative design. I have some type of intervention, and I have these two groups I want to compare between. So I may have an implied question, is this intervention effective in fill in the blank, whatever I'm doing an intervention for. But then maybe I have sub-questions. Does it work for this population, this population, this population? Because again, I want to kind of expand the knowledge. Knowing intervention is effective is helpful, but then when we talk about contextualizing it, is it helpful for everybody? Does everyone benefit from it the same way? So you could break those kind of three higher level groups down to descriptive questions that look at the existence. All right, so what are the beliefs of TMUCC students about whatever, global warming? Make something up here. All right, so we go and we find information. Maybe we have questions that are more about classifying. All right, putting things into categories. How do different groups feel? We could have descriptive comparative designs. In the relational category, we could look at composition. So that's typically more regression design. So what collection of variables or factors lead to this outcome? Or simple interactions, correlations between them. And then causality, and we can look at comparative, like what caused what, all right? And is that a reciprocal relationship, one-way relationship? Is there some type of interaction with another variable? So does study time help academic performance? So we have a belief that if you spend time studying, you're going to score better academically. But maybe there's some type of interaction. Does it depend on when you do the studying? All right, if you study in the morning but you're more of a night person, maybe it's just kind of wasted time. It's not resonating with you. Or if you're more of a morning person and I tell you start studying at 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe it doesn't work. So looking at those types of interactions. When you write your quantitative questions, you want to incorporate, ideally, all of this, but in reality, as much as you can. So PCOT is an acronym that talks about the different parts that you want addressed in your research question. Because your research question needs to be understandable to your readers and other researchers who may want to replicate your study. The P stands for your population. So in your research question, you want to talk about the population that you're doing the study on. Okay, so I just gave you the example of studying and academic performance. Well, who's my population? Am I talking about third graders, high school students, college students, graduate students? So you want to contextualize who your population is. The I stands for your intervention. So you want to talk about what it is that you're looking at. So amongst a group of high school students, I'm looking at this after-school program to help with study performance. The C, if you're doing this, is any comparisons that you're looking at. All right, so talking about comparing this group to that group. The O is your outcome. So what's the outcome variable, your dependent variable that you're working with? And then T is time. So are you doing this longitudinally? Is it over a semester? Is it in the past 6 weeks? So kind of what's the time frame of all of this, your intervention, your observations, and things that you're doing? Right, so thinking about that, framing your research question, you want to make sure you hit on all these key characteristics. This acronym is also now being used with a lot of academic journals in terms of the title of your study. And so I've been serving as an editor for 10 or 11 years now, and this is something that we look at with submissions that come in. From the title, I should be able to know these different aspects of your study. Who are you studying? What are you studying? Over what time frame? And what you're trying to find. So it should be in your research question as well. Someone reads your question, they should know what your study is about. Then we can look at qualitative designs. All right, so we look at different qualitative designs, and so I give you these kind of prompts, and the blanks, you would fill in with whatever variables you're looking at. And depending on the different types of questions that you're interested in, whichever one seems to resonate with what you want to do, lends itself to a different type of qualitative research methodology. All right, so you're looking at one person's experience, so you have kind of a case study. You're looking at the shared lived experiences. How do I make it smaller now? More of a phenomenological design. If you wanted to experience it, kind of an ethnography, if you want to be in there and kind of see what it's really like. Single lived event, so maybe you have a group case study, and then discover a theory, a grounded theory design. So the wording that you use lends itself to a particular way that you want to gather information. I want to talk to a person. I want to experience it, that hands-on component. Another acronym that you could use, this thing called finer maps. And so it talks about kind of different checkpoints that you want to have as you're making research questions. All right, so you could kind of go through this in your head after you've created your research question to see if they work. Are they feasible? Is it something that you could do? All right. I want to sample 1 million individuals. Is it feasible? Well, maybe your dissertation is going to probably take you a decade or so to do. Is it interesting? All right. So I'm not sure in all of your fields, but I know we tell our doctoral students in the counseling program is kind of the things we look for in a dissertation. It has to have academic rigor, it has to contribute to the knowledge base, and it has to have an applicable audience. So it's something that people want to know that's going to be helpful. The N, is it novel? Is it something new? And so when you think of novelty, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do something groundbreaking. It could be that you see another study out there that sparks something in you, and you think, well, how could I tweak that? So maybe you look at that study